Hello everyone, I'm Joe Cronin and welcome to the Toss-Up. As the semester comes to a close here in Bloomington, a new door to the collegiate sporting world is ready to be swung open. The college football playoffs are right around the corner as the 12 schools are set to dance on the national stage. Stick around because a full CFP discussion is coming up next on the Toss-Up. Finally here, well, sort of. The first ever 12-team college football playoff starts in just 1 week to put the cherry on top of what has been one of the best seasons in recent memory. Storylines are riddled through this postseason, whether it's the undeniable Oregon Ducks on their undefeated quest in the Big Ten, the Bluefield Warriors and the Boise State Broncos, headlined by the incomparable Ashton Jeanty, or of course the hometown Indiana Hoosiers, who are the only one of the dozen schools to have a first-year head coach at the helm. The 2024 college football playoffs has the making of being a masterpiece in the sport's postseason history, and I'm joined by the IUSTV football beat, Ben Haller, Thomas Crow, and Luke Brennaman. Gentlemen, this is an exciting time, not for just Indiana football, but really college football as a whole, isn't it?
It kind of, you had to see Indiana on the selection show to really believe that this was going to happen, especially going back to the beginning of the year.
Unbelievable that Indiana is in the playoff, and now we get to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, we might as well just get right into it. 12 teams selected, some teams left out. Obviously, that was a big storyline. Nick Saban wasn't all too happy, and that's regardless of his opinion. Ben, I'll go to you first. What were your thoughts on the 12 teams that got into this playoffs?
Yeah, well, I think the only debate you have is the SMU versus Alabama. I think I'm happy with this decision, and I'll tell you why. Because SMU was ranked above Alabama coming into the conference championships, I'm glad that SMU didn't get punished too much for making the ACC championship. They should get rewarded for making their conference championship and not punished.
Absolutely. Thomas?
You defend SMU. I have a feeling he's going to defend someone else. I'm going to talk about something different. The way the teams are put together. Oregon wins the Big Ten championship and now has to face the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee. And you look at Penn State, they play SMU and Boise State. I don't know. I don't know if that's the right judgment. You know, is it better for Oregon if they lost the game is what I'm getting at. I don't know if they're going to keep it that way in the future. There might be some adjustments made.
There were discussions. I mean, there's already been talks for 2026 to have a 14-team playoff, and it's really just anything to get Alabama. And Luke, thoughts on the 12 teams?
I think 12 is the perfect number. The format obviously has its issues. I mean, when you look at teams like Arizona State and BYU, they've earned their way into the playoff. But have they earned their way into a first-round bye? That's definitely a debate that I think won't end until a change is made, and I think that we're going to see one coming really quick. In regards to the 12 teams that made it, I would have liked to see Alabama in, but there's not really a strong argument. Like Ben said, you can't punish SMU for playing in a conference championship. I think Alabama's a top 12 team in the country. They were left out, but if you lose 3 games and 2 of them are subpar losses, that's going to happen.
Now, Thomas, I like what you mentioned with some of the formatting. I mean, there were talks nationally how that 5 seed was really that prime spot. Mm-hmm. You're playing the 12. In this instance, it's Clemson, the ACC champion, and then the winner of that game goes and plays the Big 12 champion. I mean, is that the favorable path being that 5 seed?
I think it has to be. I think Arizona State, you look at Texas. Arizona State as the team that you now go to play in a bye if you beat Clemson. I think that's a pretty good lineup. But like I said, I like Penn State's path too. I think both of those paths are desirable, but the basis of what I'm getting at is Oregon now having to play either Ohio State or Tennessee. That 1 seed is not very desirable in my opinion.
We'll definitely harp on some of the matchups later in the episode. I want to get something I mentioned. It was the storylines of really the 12 teams that are in this playoffs. From Clemson at the 12 to Oregon at the 1, there is a story for all of these teams that makes sense why they're here. There's reasons why they're here, and it's pretty fun to watch all these 12 teams. So, Ben, I'll ask you this. What team has the best story in this playoffs?
It's hard not to say Indiana, but I have a feeling that everyone in this panel is going to want to say Indiana. That's why I think like Arizona State is being slept on their story compared to Indiana's. Indiana picked to finish 17th out of 18 of the Big Ten. Arizona State was picked to finish dead last in the Big 12, 16th out of 16 teams. I think it just makes it's good for college football as a whole to have this many teams surprise people.
I think what their head coach, Kenny Dillingham, he's only 34 years old, and what he's doing, just the turnaround, and Cam Scatabo is an extremely underrated back right there. Thomas, your best storyline?
Carson Beck's health. I think Georgia is a very, very good team. Deserved victors of the SEC. They beat Texas twice. I think Georgia actually is a better team without Carson Beck, at least in the last couple weeks. Gunnar Henderson didn't play a great game, but he got him over the hump in the SEC championship, came in, led a scoring drive in his first drive. But Kirby Smart's got a decision to make. If Carson Beck is not fully healthy but can play, does he do it? I don't know. I think that's something to look for.
We have seen instances with Jalen Hurts and Tua Tagovailoa a few years back where Tua took the starting job, and then in the SEC championship, Jalen Hurts came in, and they're back and forth. So it'll be interesting to see. I have liked what the offense has looked like. Gunnar Henderson has a little bit more mobility than Beck
100%.
has. Luke, what's your favorite storyline?
Let's be real, guys. It's the Hoosiers. I mean, if you hire a coach like Curt Cignetti, he's going to go out there. He's going to tell it how he thinks it is, at least. And he took all the criticism in the world. Us four, we're all in Indianapolis for the media days at the start, and he said, we're going to come back here and play in the Big Ten championship game. We all kind of looked at each other and laughed. They obviously didn't make the Big Ten championship game.
They were close.
But who would have thought going into the final week of the season there was a route for Indiana to play? They were a shoe into the playoff. Now they're in. So Google him. He wins, and now he has a chance to do it in an in-state legacy, pretty much state championship-esque game next Friday.
I will say with Ben, like you mentioned with Arizona State, that was also their first year in the Big 12, and I think that was incredibly impressive. And with Curt Cignetti, like I mentioned before, he's the only first-year head coach of any of the 12, and then you have other teams like Oregon, undefeated. Their first year in the Big Ten just ran through. The storylines are there. This is a really fun playoffs, and that's when we get into these first-round matchups. So we won't be mentioning Oregon, Arizona State, Boise State, or Georgia right now. First-round matchups. Luke, I'll start with you. Which one of the four looks the most exciting?
I think you have to just look at the idea of SEC Big Ten. There's kind of been the butting of the heads all year of what is better football. That's always been a debate, so it really jumps out at Ohio State, Tennessee at the Horseshoe. I think it's so cool that colleges have a chance to host these playoff games now with the expanded format. Obviously, after this round, it will go to neutral locations, but for Ohio State to have to bounce back off a Michigan loss, not playing in the Big Ten championship game, and then for Tennessee, you have a freshman quarterback. You're trying to prove everyone wrong and kind of say, we've been a sleeping giant. We beat Alabama the last couple of years, but now we're here to stay. This is their chance.
I do think Tennessee might have the coaching edge with Josh Heupel. I think he's done a great job in his time there, but the shoe is going to be loud. I understand Tennessee is used to that noise, but how will a freshman quarterback do in a situation like that?
I don't know. Nico I is about as talented as they get. I think Ohio State's defense is a whole different animal when you look at the crowd paired with that defense. They're the best scoring defense in college football, the best run defense in college football. They're overall the best team in college football, I would argue. The offense, though, like you mentioned, it has had its problems. The coaching staff has been under scrutiny, but I will say, don't give up on the Buckeyes just yet. I think they're one of the best three teams in this playoffs.
That $20 million roster is for real. Thomas, what matchup's looking the most exciting?
Well, you're right. I never trust a true freshman in a big game, but I'm not going to talk about that. We all want to talk about the Hoosiers. Let me have my time now. Indiana, Notre Dame, 7-10. It is, like you said, it's the state championship battle of kind of the North and South, Bloomington, South Bend. Ticket prices are out of this world. You need a couple Benjamins to get going to this game.
Four times more than the next. It's
unbelievable. Riley Leonard, Curtis Rourke, Jeremiah Love, Tyson Lawton, Justice Ellison, Marcus Freeman, Curt Cignetti. This is going to be such a cool game. In-state battle. I wouldn't call it a rivalry because the Hoosiers have never been here before. Notre Dame has experience on this stage. They've been in big football games before. Indiana has not. I'm very excited to see what this comes out to.
I think what's so fun about this 12-team format is the rarity of some of these teams playing. With Tennessee, Ohio State, this is only the second time ever. 1996 was the first, and Peyton Manning was the quarterback, and Eddie George was on Ohio State to put some perspective. And then IU Notre Dame. This is only meeting number 30, which isn't that much considering they're in-state with each other. It's a reversible jacket game, too. The amount of Notre Dame football fans and IU basketball fans that have grown up, everything kind of circles around this one. And I am excited. Do you think they were deserving of that Friday night spot, the first game in this playoff format?
I think South Bend and I think Notre Dame is an awesome place to play and watch football. I think fans are not going to be disappointed, whether the people who are going to the game or the people watching at home. like I said, it's going to be an awesome game, and I think it's a great way to kick off the 12-team field.
Notre Dame Stadium seats over 80,000 and is the smallest host venue for the first round. That is
Jesus.
crazy. Touchdown Jesus is going to be rowdy on Friday. Ben, get to you for your most exciting matchup.
You can go through all the storylines. I think you can find a great storyline in all 4 of these first-round matchups. But the best game on the football field will be Indiana-Notre Dame. It's 2 teams that don't have a ton of great wins this year, but they have beaten their opponents by a lot. So they're 2 teams that I think have great mindsets coming into the game. And I don't think, one team is particularly incredibly more battle-tested than the other, which is what I like about it.
Notre Dame obviously on a long win streak right now after their Week 2 blunder to Northern Illinois. And I feel like this is a team that's been so desperate to prove the relevancy. They've been in the playoffs a few times, but they've always gotten blown out. And this is really their chance here to show that they belong with these top dogs. They are a blue blood college football program, but that'll be fun. So I want to move forward now to more team specific. Thomas, I want you to start with this one. Who's the best team of these 12? Is it Oregon? Is it that obvious?
I don't know, Joe. I mean, there's so much parity right now. Yes, it is a 12-team playoff compared to the 4-team. You had a little bit more of like a, yes, that's the best team. You look at this field, I have no idea. I think Oregon might be the easy answer, but I'm going to go a little off my rocker a little bit. I think it's Texas.
Texas?
I don't know.
Wow.
They just lost to Georgia twice. I don't think they would lose to them again if they came to see it. I think Ewers is one of the more experienced quarterbacks in this field. They have good receivers, Bond, Golden, those guys. I think they have a good coach and play caller in Steve Sarkisian. They were close in the SEC championship. If they win the SEC championship, I think the narrative is a little different. But that outcome doesn't worry me. Like I said, I don't know who the best team is. I just wanted to talk about Texas.
It's tough right now, Luke. Best team?
I think I hinted at it in my previous answer. Guys, I'm still with the Buckeyes right now, and I know that's a really hot take, but when you have a defense that I would say over 50% of those starters are going to be NFL guys, and they are so deep, they are so talented, and they are so well coached. You look at that Michigan game in specific that everyone wants to point to. I mean, the Penn State game, that's their best win of the year too. On the road, you win in Happy Valley, and they didn't even play good. They turned the ball over in that game. Will Howard threw a pick 6. The difference maker and X factor for Ohio State is their offense. Their running backs are the best tandem in the country. So the fact that they didn't get them going against Michigan really concerned me. But I think Ryan Day is going to come up with a new philosophy. You give these really creative coaches a couple extra weeks to scheme a game. I think you don't realize how much that means. Ohio State is so deep, and I think they are the most talented team. If they show up and play their football, they are the best team, in my opinion.
Not playing in the Big Ten championship might really benefit the Buckeyes to kind of harp in and take some time to themselves to reflect. Because I will say with rivalry weekend, as we saw chaos into the entire scheme and landscape of college football, it's kind of a toss-up, no pun intended, with how things come into play. I mean, you got flags planted on the field, fights breaking out. So I don't gauge as much with that Ohio State-Michigan game, because Michigan's still a very talented team when it matters, like the up front. So like with Henderson and Judkins when they struggled, I don't look at that as much. Just a bit of a grain of salt. It was a bad loss, but still. Ben, best team.
Yeah, look, guys, there's been a lot of parity in college football. Almost all of it has been 2 through 128, however many teams are in the FBS. Oregon has stayed out of it. They've been #1 team in the country for the majority of the season, which is crazy to me that none of us are picking Oregon. I actually am going to agree with Luke, and I'll tell you what. When it comes to the playoffs like this, it's not about who the best all-around team is, who's the most consistent. I think Oregon has the highest floor in the country, and they've shown that this year. But I think when it comes to the playoffs and everyone's probably going to be playing the best football, it's about who has the highest ceiling. And when you ask who has the highest ceiling, I don't think there's any doubt that it's Ohio State. They have the most talent on the offensive side of the ball. Even with Will Howard, I think there's a lot of questions around him. But, I mean, you're throwing the ball to Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith. I mean, you don't need to do much. Ohio State, to me, I think is the most talented, so the highest ceiling team in the playoff.
And I think something to add on to that, Ryan Day might be fighting for his job.
That's true.
Yeah,
His players might be he might be the only coach in this field where if they don't win.
That's crazy to think about, too, that a 10-2
It is
season
crazy
in
to
the
think,
playoffs.
but I think it's realistic.
It's the standard.
Another thing that kind of catches me off guard is I was the first one to say Will Howard is the X factor for Ohio State. He's going to be the guy that if they do win a national championship, he's got to go. But this was a guy before the Michigan game. We're talking about to be finalist for the Heisman Trophy. Not that he was a shoo-in, but he was certainly in that conversation. So after that win against Indiana to pick up a top 5 win at home, he certainly jumped in that conversation. So the fact that that's kind of the spot right now that we're a little worried about, I think is a testament to how deep this team really is.
I think Will Howard is still a very talented and capable quarterback when it matters the most for these kind of upper echelon teams. I want to move now, not weakest team, but an underdog. I don't know if Ohio State's an underdog because they're the 8th seed. They're still, the talents have riddled through there. But what's a team that you feel like is not getting a lot of love but can make some noise? Ben, I'll start with you.
Yeah, it depends on what you kind of consider an underdog. They're the 3 seed, but I think the way they're perceived nationally, Boise State, I think, is getting slept on a lot. I mean, you go back and look at what they did first few weeks of the season against Oregon. They kept it really close in Eugene.
Loss.
Yeah, 3-point loss in Eugene. Ashton Jeanty, obviously one of the best players in the country, but you are not having a season Ashton Jeanty's having without having a great offensive line. And it translates to the defensive side, too. Up front, Boise State's just really talented.
They're leading in categories all through the Mountain West. I understand that the strength of schedule talk is always there, but they dominated their competition, and Jeanty was at that front runner of that. Thomas, who's your kind of underdog sleeper team?
I considered Ohio State, but I'm not going to call Ohio State an underdog. Just because their seeding doesn't mean they're an underdog. They're still, like you said, one of the best 2 or 3 teams in this. I look at Penn State. I think Penn State, nobody has really bought much into them this year. Lost to Ohio State, lost to Oregon in the Big Ten Championship. But I look at them, they have the easiest path in my opinion. SMU, then unfortunately Boise State. I think those are 2 matchups that they win. And, like I hit on earlier in the show, James Franklin losing a big game might have been the best thing that happened to this team this year. They have an easier path than Oregon, and I think they take advantage of that, makes it the Final Four.
I will say with the Big Ten Championship, they gave Oregon a run for their money, an Oregon defense that had looked very solid all season long, put up over 30 on them, and Drew Allery's looked
and had some adversity they had to come back from too.
Absolutely. Luke, underdog.
I'm going to go a different route here. They're 7-1 in the odds, so I'm going to consider them an underdog. I'm going to go with the Fighting Irish. I think Notre Dame, they don't have that resume-boosting win, but all year they've stayed the course. They're kind of like Indiana, outside of Indiana's loss being to a top 5 team. But losing to Northern Illinois, everyone wants to go back to that game. The whole reason that this playoff is now a 12-team playoff and it's expanded is because they want teams who had a fluke week, a bad loss, to still be able to compete for a national championship. And guys, I think Notre Dame is more than ready to compete. If you look at their path, if they beat the Hoosiers, where they're touchdown favorites, then you're going up against a second-string quarterback. I mean, we're going to see on that in regards to Carson Beck's injury, but that's not in Athens. That's at a neutral location. And Marcus Freeman knows how to coach. I think they have an experienced quarterback in Riley Leonard. Notre Dame is a really good football team, and no one's really talking about them.
If they don't lose that game week 2 to NIU, I think the narrative behind Notre Dame is
completely flipped.
Extremely different.
Way different.
Very, very different. I think you're right. I think Notre Dame is a really good team.
It's a good one. Before we head to break, I understand this isn't about the college football playoffs, but it is relevant because 2 of the 4 finalists for this prestigious award are in the playoffs. I understand one of them is in this 2-horse race, but here's what it comes down to. It's Ashton Jeanty. It's Travis Hunter. Ben, who's winning the Heisman?
Give me Travis Hunter. I mean, what he's doing right now, I understand that people like to say that snaps aren't a stat, but I really think they are.
A stat.
I think it should be, considering for someone who plays both sides of the ball and is really good on both sides of the ball. He's guarded the best wide receivers throughout the whole season in the Big 12 while also putting up really good numbers on the offensive side of the ball.
All right. Thomas?
It's been about 4 decades since we've seen kind of a season that someone's had at the running back spot that I think Ashton Jeanty's having. Not only is he leading the nation in rushing, his yards after contact would be second in the nation in rushing. Ashton Jeanty's had an unbelievable season. I think we have to reward him for it.
His contact balance, it baffles me. He embraces it and just keeps going. His afterburners, it's one of the most impressive football feats I have seen in a long time. And Saquon Barkley used to trot down in Happy Valley back in 2017, Luke.
I'm on both sides here. It's so tough because I think snaps is absolutely a stat because it's never been a stat because we haven't had to have this conversation. So what Travis Hunter is doing is all world. It's incredible, and we'll see what it's going to do at the next level. That's another conversation. But I think if you look at a school like Boise State and you look at a running back at a school like that, and the fact that they have a bye in the college football playoff, and he's their guy, he has more rushing yards than over 100 FBS teams.
That is crazy.
Yeah.
More than 100 teams. He's only like 130 yards short of the all-time season single rushing yards record. If a running back can will his team to the position that they're in as the 3 seed in the college football playoff in today's day and age football, with the transfer portal and teams being able to spend millions on their roster, he is the Heisman Trophy winner, in my opinion.
I think on the Mountain West Championship, the broadcast kind of captured it perfectly. They didn't take away from what Hunter's doing, but like you said, Ashton Jeanty has been the best player on a team that has propelled to a bye in the playoffs. Not just making the playoffs, a bye. Right. And I think that says enough if that's pretty obvious of who I'm picking, Jeanty or Hunter. And that's, again, not discrediting. Travis Hunter is a generational player on both sides of the ball, but Ashton Jeanty is doing things that we have never seen in this room. The control room has never seen something like that, and it should be celebrated. But with that, we're going to take a quick break, but make sure you stick around because coming up after the break, the panel and I are going to have the first ever college football playoff bracket breakdown presented by the Toss Up. Don't go anywhere.
The Toss Up, Fridays on IUSTV.
Welcome back to the Toss Up. As promised, we have some bracket breakdown of the college football playoff presented by the Toss Up. The bracket is now on the screen. Here it is. Here's how it works. Each of us have one of the first round matches that we're going to break down. Then each of us will have a quarterfinals game. I'll step out, and then we will take a vote between the 3 panelists to decide the semifinals, and then the college football playoff champion. Luke, we're going to start with you. Tennessee, Ohio State.
I mean, if you watch the show to this point, you know I am very high on the Buckeyes. A home game against a freshman quarterback is going to continue what I go back to. I think Tennessee, yes, they deserve to be here. Yes, they're a very good program, and they're a rising giant in college football like they always have been and should be. But this is Ohio State's year. I have them facing the Ducks in which was probably the best regular season game of the season when Ohio State went to Oregon. And to preview that matchup, I know we're going to get into it, but that was a 1-point loss on the road. Ohio State turned the ball over multiple times in that game. So with that just being one of their 2 losses on the season, I think that's every reason to believe that the Buckeyes make it out of the first round. I have them knocking off Tennessee. And Joe, I have them doing it handedly. I think they win this game by easily double digits, maybe 3 touchdowns.
So it's going to be sad trails back to Rocky Top for Tennessee. Thomas, Clemson in Texas. That's a fun one. First ever matchup.
Clemson, Texas is a very good game. 2 very good quarterbacks. Cade Klubnik threw for 33 touchdowns this year. Phil Maffa ran for over 1,000 yards. They have multiple players on that D-line. They had a lot of sacks, one of the higher rates in the country. But like I said earlier, I think Texas is one of the best teams in this playoff. Quinn Ewers is a very good quarterback, and I think he's going to show it. Golden's going to play well. Bond's going to play well. That defense is very good. And I think Steve Sarkisian is one of the better play callers in the country. I don't think this game stays very close for very long. I think Texas gets them in the air and then finishes off on the ground. Texas wins this game.
Maybe sending a message that Dabo Swinney needs to start using the transfer portal. Ben, you got the in-state battle. IU Notre Dame.
I have the best game in the first round, like we talked about. I think Indiana's obviously had a great season. Notre Dame, they're top 10 of the country in 3 important things. Total defense, total rushing, and then the turnover margin. I think they've been excellent at forcing turnovers this year. I think that's something they're going to do well, and they're going to beat Indiana.
Apparently the shirts are Catholics versus regular people. Is that the shirts that are coming out from IU?
I don't know if I'd call Indiana fans regular people.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. That's crazy. So I got SMU and Penn State. I do have Penn State. James Franklin is moving on. Gonna move quickly here. Ohio State, Oregon, like you said, a rematch of one of the best games all season.
Guys, I think that this is going to be the best game in the entire playoff. And that's the best part about the 12-team playoff is with 4 teams like it's been in previous years, if there's one bad game or blowout, it kind of ruins the whole thing, especially if it's in the title game like we've seen the past couple of years. So Ohio State, Oregon in a neutral site. Guys, I have the Buckeyes in this one. It's good. The look-ahead spread has Oregon just as a 1-point favorite. It's kind of ironic because Oregon did win the opening game by 1 point. But this time, not in Eugene, not all the way out west, not at the start of the season. I think the Buckeyes are going to be ready to go, especially with some momentum if they beat Tennessee in that opening round.
I feel like this game will be chills in the Rose Bowl. These 2 teams, it's going to be a lot of fun. Thomas, you got a fun one. Arizona State and Texas.
No arguments here. Longhorns move on. Longhorns, I think Sam Levitt's a good quarterback. He threw for, I think, 25 touchdowns, only 5 interceptions this season. Cam Scadaboo, one of the better running backs in the country. I think he gets overshadowed, actually, by the 3 seeds running back. But I don't think this game's close. I think Kenny Dillingham and Arizona State is a deserving team to be in this. But I think they meet their match with Texas. I think Texas it's too much for Arizona State, and I think they win this game 2 or 3 touchdowns and head to play the Buckeyes.
So it looks like we're going to have a Buckeye-Longhorn matchup in the semis. Ben, you took the Hoosiers against Georgia.
No, I took Notre Dame.
Oh, you took Notre Dame.
I did take Notre Dame against Georgia, and I'm going to take Notre Dame again, or to beat Georgia too. I don't foresee Georgia's offense doing enough to keep up with Notre Dame. Wow. I think Riley Leonard, he's caught a lot of slack as the season's gone on because of the Northern Illinois loss. I think it was one of the biggest reasons he's caught that slack. If you look at what he's done in the last 4 games or so, it's impressive. It's top 5 in the last 4 weeks in passing yards, and I think Notre Dame's offense is just too talented.
Ben, I have to ask you this. What happens more times? Georgia scores more points or more barks?
A lot of barks. Too many barks. So here we go. Penn State and Boise State.
This is the Fiesta Bowl, by the way. If there's any history with the Fiesta Bowl in Boise State, go Broncos. Ashton Jeanty to the semifinals. Our semifinals is set. So now I'm out of this mix, and now it comes down to a vote. We have Ohio State and Texas, and then Notre Dame and Boise State. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah. All right, we'll start Ohio State and Texas. Luke, make your case.
Guys, this is what everyone wants. This is what the networks want. This is what TV ratings want. And guys, I think this is what fans want. If you're not, a Tennessee, Clemson, etc. fan of the 2 teams who got buys, obviously. This would be an all-time matchup. We talked about the SEC and Big Ten kind of clashing of the heads. I'm personally going to stay with the hot hand and ride the Buckeyes. I'm all over them. I have them as my, a team playing in the national championship. And I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say about
One vote Buckeyes.
I think Texas, like I said, Texas is a good team. They've been in big games. They were in the SEC championship. They have experience. Sarkisian has his unit kind of right where he wants them. This seems like the strongest Texas team that he has had. Last year, they got to this point, didn't finish it. Now, this year, I think they do finish it. I think Ryan Day's job goes with it.
All right, Ben, you get to decide.
I think with the expectations, Texas has done a good job. I mean, they've beaten all the teams they should beat, but once again, it's a floor-ceiling kind of thing for me. Texas, I think, has the highest floor here, but Ohio State's the more talented team. I think when everything's going well, which in these scenarios is usually when everything does go well, I like Ohio State.
Horns down,
what if
Ohio State
in that
to
game?
The national
I like
championship.
Ohio State still.
Okay.
So, horns down, Ohio State to the national championship.
I don't disagree really either.
And now, the fun semifinal of Boise State and Notre Dame. Ben, I'll let you start with this one.
I've been riding Notre Dame this whole time. It feels weird going into the playoff bracket. I didn't think I'd be saying that I think Notre Dame's going to make the national championship, but you look at the way the bracket plays out, I don't see there being a whole lot of teams that I think are, have a huge chance to beat Notre Dame. I think it's a lot of 50-50 games for the Fighting Irish. I think this is one they're going to be favored in. Their defense, if there's any defense that could stop Ashton Jeanty, Notre Dame's one of them. They have a really good defensive line, and I think they'll be able to do so. Take out Jeanty, I think they'll have no problem making the championship.
If Marcus Freeman and company are able to do that, that would shut all the haters up for Notre Dame. Luke?
I don't love the matchup. I personally think it's going to be Penn State, but either way, I'm with Ben. I personally do think it's going to be Penn State. So no matter who it is, I still have Notre Dame beating them. I think Notre Dame is extremely physical, and that's what that matchup is going to come down to. Notre Dame has a really good quarterback that, like Ben said a couple minutes ago, nobody's talking about Riley Leonard. That was the first guy to go into the transfer portal from Wake Forest, and everyone was like, oh my gosh, Notre Dame got their guy. And I think they have him in Leonard. He's experienced. He's played in big games before, none bigger than this one if it does happen. But no matter what, Penn State and Boise State, a team to send you into the Final Four, or no, that would be Final Two. I think that's a matchup that Notre Dame fans would love to have.
So it is decided, but Thomas, I'll let you get your input in.
It's a sweep.
Just sweep.
3 for 3.
Out.
Like we said earlier in the first part of this
season.
show, if Notre Dame doesn't lose in week 2, I think they might be the 1 seed in this tournament, at least 2. This changes things.
I don't think they can.
Well, I guess at the end of it, you're right.
Yes.
You're right. But like I said, I think they're one of the best teams in the country. I think the narrative is different, and if they win in week 2, don't have that now, but I still think they make it.
I think this would shape up to be a very peculiar national championship because last season, it would rematch a game from last season where Marcus Freeman accidentally fielded 10 men on his defense, 2 plays in goal-to-go situations. Ohio State and Notre Dame. That would be a fun one. 2 very good defenses, 2 very good rosters, 2 storied programs. Thomas, I'll let you start.
This is tough. This is tough. When you get in a game as big as this, it's the stars that change the game. I think at running back, Jeremiah Love and the double-headed monster that Ohio State has is relatively similar. Ohio State has better receivers, but at the end of the day, we all know what position matters in this game. It's quarterback. I think Riley Leonard is better than Will Howard. I think Notre Dame's our national champions, actually.
Touchdown, Jesus, vote 1. Luke. Sorry, I'll mute you
This
last.
is my personal matchup if you let me fill out this entire thing, and this is the one that I'm wrestling with the most. Notre Dame is so good, they're so talented, but have they been here before? Have they won the big one? That's the same with Ryan Day, though. He's won the big one. He went to Penn State and won that ranked game, top 5 matchup. He hosted Indiana and won that. But does he win the biggest of them all? For Ohio State fans, that's the Michigan game. That's the college football playoff games the last couple of seasons. I don't see that happening. I think Notre Dame is this year's national champion.
Wow.
Wow. Oh, that takes the cake right there. Ben, I'll let you get some final input, though.
Well, look, I think this is an interesting matchup, something that a lot of people don't think of as any sort of rivalry. But where Luke and I are from in Cincinnati, there are a lot of fans of both teams, and they don't like each other for whatever reason it's been. So I think it'd be a fun national championship. In my eyes, what's interesting about the 12-game playoff, I cannot trust Notre Dame to play 4 really good games back to back, just with the history.
They've done
and
10.
with Marcus Freeman's.
They've
done 10, but you look at some of those opponents, it doesn't match up to anything they're going to see in the playoffs. So I think with that being said, and Marcus Freeman's track history, I like Ryan Day and Ohio State.
All right, well, we did have 2 votes for Notre Dame. So Notre Dame is the national championship according to the IUSTV football beat and the toss-up. That's going to wrap up this episode. The college football playoffs, they get going next Friday, December 20th. The 4 of us will be in South Bend for IU and Notre Dame. That's going to be a fun one. Our boots will be on the ground. No pun intended to the boot that I have on. But this is also our last show of the semester. So thank you so much for watching all semester long and all year long, really. It's the end of 2024 season for the toss-up and for IUSTV Sports. So have a happy holidays, a happy new year, stay safe, and we'll see you in 2025.
Thanks for watching IUSTV Sports. Be sure to subscribe at IUSTV and follow us on Instagram and X at IUSTV Sports.